Welcome to the show, Bishop Jackson.
Thank you, sir.
How you
I'm
doing?
glad you invited me to come and join you tonight.
I told you. Look, I told you after the Hannity special, I was going to try to have you on my show because I think people need to hear exactly what you're doing, and you and TD Jakes, Bishop Jakes have something that people need to hear. That y'all are just starting out. Let me also introduce my co-host, Angel Fleming.
How you
Hello,
doing?
Angel.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. You guys impressed me so much in that panel. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Well, I'm glad you did. There were some who felt like we had been sipping some ungodly brew, but we're trying to make a difference and help out.
I love that. I love that. Listen, Bishop, I know that you've been watching and praying over this nation um, because of what has been happening of late. And I know that you have seen a movement within some of the black community. I'm not going to say all, but in some of the black community that have labeled themselves Black Lives Matters.
Yeah.
And the name, I think, was specially crafted so that if anybody has any problems with whatever they do under that name and they call out that name, then they would be demonized for not. So with black on black crime not being called out, abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, and many of the black communities, why aren't these organizations, or these events, why aren't they being called out by the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I can't speak for the movement. I've had many who wanted to, get me on board and just sit down with us. I think, though, that at root there is an energy behind many in the Black Lives Matters movement that says, hey, this is awful, but there seems to be an attachment of blame to whites and the middle class blacks, and that, hey, you got to do something about this. And so can I tell you what I agree with about Black Lives Matter?
Yes, go
and
ahead.
then let me tell you what I think is a dividing point where we need to do a little bit better and from a Christian perspective. I think people being hurt, as I said on Hannity's show at the end, we don't want anybody to think that we don't care about the death of these young black men, especially in the community. We do care. And their lives do matter. But the way we communicate that cannot be confused with condoning rioting and that kind of thing. In 1967, in Cincinnati, Ohio, a man named Postile Lasky was convicted as the Cincinnati Strangler. And they attributed 7 deaths, raped and strangled, to this black man. The city got upset. We went out, and I'm talking we collectively, and rioted. I didn't. I was but a kid. And they tore down my neighborhood. The next year, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Everybody was sad. But hundreds of people were wounded, and about $3.6 million in 68 terms, and that would be more money now, worth of damage was done in the neighborhood. And guess what? The two grocery stores we had, there used to be a Kroger in Avondale and Cincinnati. Man, that thing was torn up, messed up, and we tore down our own neighborhood and made it dangerous for people to live. And so I believe that what's missing in that movement right now is what we're trying to add with the Reconciled Church movement, and that is constructive bridges that will produce class, poverty alleviation, class alleviation, and then freedom from any kind of racial discrimination. And we feel like the problem is not simple. It's complicated, and we can't blame white people for our problem right now. So that's an introduction. We can talk back and forth, but I hope uh, there's enough. The church has got to lead the way in showing best practices, in showing here's how we deal with the education problem. And our website, thereconciledchurch.org, there's some people there talking about prayer, talking about education, talking about criminal justice reform, talking about civic engagement in community, talking about all these things, family, and interventions. We have 7 distinct bridges where we're essentially saying, whites, we're not blaming you, but we are going to say this. If you as the white community don't help us, and if the Hispanic community doesn't help us, and we all come together as black, white, brown, and Asian Christians, if we don't do that, then we'll miss a moment to heal this great land. But if we work together and don't care who gets the credit, there's no telling what God can do.
Right, that's big. That's big because so many people want to be out in front. So many people want to hear their name called instead of fixing the problem. And that's where I think a lot of the bottleneck comes in.
Yeah.
Police arrests are down in the city of Baltimore. You live, or your church is in Beltsville. Okay.
Yeah,
right,
but
okay.
I'm about 35 from Beltsville. I'm 35 minutes from downtown Baltimore, or so. Yeah.
So, Bishop, a couple weeks ago, a cop came out and said that morale was down due to the fact that they didn't feel that the city leaders were there to defend them. Meanwhile, last weekend, 28 people were shot, 9 people died.
Yep. Horrific.
Where do we go, Bishop?
Well, I think we got to take responsibility. Here's the ugly truth of it, brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know whether
break it down now.
Yeah, let me break it down, and hopefully Angel will agree with me. She sounded all buoyant and effervescent in the last segment, but
I'm taking it in. I'm waiting for my chance.
Okay, all right, wonderful. My sense is so many whites feel blamed, and they say, "Well, this is a family problem," and it's going. But if you wait to heal the black family from where it is now, it's going to take 20, 30, 40 years to heal it at best. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to take responsibility to bring certain reforms to the African American community immediately right now. I think the criminal justice measures that we need are not just in the police car. You saw me with the funnel. Mm-hmm. You know, if we just focus on, we got to have every policeman have a camera on them because we're going to protect the community from them. That alone is not going to help us. We got to deal with the criminalization of the black community, which means, among other things, nonviolent people who have perpetrated crimes need to be restored and healed. This is not being easy on crime. It's just saying good people sometimes do bad stuff. There's some people that we're scared of that they need to stay locked up, you know, because they've committed murder and mayhem. They've done some horrible things. But there are some people that if they're in an urban setting and you don't have any rights, you can't vote, you can't get a job, you can't find a place to stay, you are dead at 35, and you go to prison, you become a master-degreed criminal. Mm-hmm. And you have some recidivism. Something's wrong with that. That's a bridge. Another thing, educationally, everybody's been saying that they're projecting how many prison cells we need to build for the future based on third-grade test scores. And that may not be exactly true anymore, but it is a truism. So we can do something about improving these schools, and some of us churches, what we got to do, I'm working now trying to get funding to do a massive after-school reading program for kids and to make sure everybody in my church can read. And if I don't do that, I can't blame the white man for my kids in my church, in my community, the fact that they can't read. If you can't read, you can't get a job. Can't get a job, you can't become a household leader as a man. You can't take care of your family. You're going to be out there doing something untoward on the streets, and those problems feed together.
Now,
Economic development.
now,
Jobs. Go ahead, Angel.
well, Bishop, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Because I feel as if we were talking to Stacey Dash last week, and what an amazing young woman she is. She's just so bright and feisty, and I love her. And one thing that I wish we could get these communities to understand more is what political party has been in power in these areas for the better part of 5 to 6 decades. Because I know in Boston, I live in Boston. I'm telephoning it in right now.
Wow.
And in
I
Boston,
love Boston.
you know, Boston is great, but the city of Brockton, which is not even 15 minutes south of it, is hanging on by a thread.
Wow.
And the city just below that, New Bedford, is on the 10 most violent cities of the United States list. And so, but this speaks to a trend across the nation of a certain political party with certain political ends have been in control of these cities for so long, where the kids there is no choice. There is no choice, and yet there's still
Amen.
these people still think that they have to vote Democrat. How has that helped? How has that helped your parents?
It hasn't helped, and I think that, you know, the civil rights movement leaders said this. MLK and others said this. They say we have no permanent friends, only permanent interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our community has been duped into thinking that the Democratic Party is a permanent friend. And as you may recall, years ago, all blacks were Republicans. And I'm not trying to sing the praises of the Republican Party alone. I'm just saying that you got to consider candidates who may be Republican. You got to consider, if you're listening out there and you say, I don't know if I believe like the conservatives believe. Well, get a biblical worldview, first of all, and begin to examine what these parties are saying. And then I agree with you. We need to elect people who are going to do something. You know what? One of the problems, the sins of the Democratic leadership of the black community has been? It has been that they have gotten elected based on the politics of grievance, meaning that whoever screams the loudest and says, there's a problem, I'm angry, I'm upset, we need to solve this problem, we elect them. But then when they get into office, and that means largely they've been Democratic, our black representatives are black-friendly representatives, then we don't hold them accountable. They haven't done anything to change the policies. So to Stacey Dash's point, I think that that's the truth. I'm a little bit not so much trying to give Republicans how can I say it, a free pass. Right now, what I want is I want us, folks like us on the radio right now, to get an agenda and say to both parties, but especially to Democratic parties, the proof needs to be in the pudding. Yep. What you going to do about these problems on these streets? What you going to do about, in Baltimore, all these years of Democratic leaders in the city, all these years of 90% of the people on the state legislature Democratic, what are y'all doing about the poverty level in Baltimore City? And so to your point, I think you're right. If we don't make people accountable, then they keep la la la, you know.
Yeah.
In the right setting, I'm just going to talk black. I'm going to dress black. I'm going to talk black, and that won't help the next generation. It won't help us.
Now, Bishop, I don't know how much more time we have with you, but another thought just came to me. You know, as far as Black Lives Matter, and really, if we're Christians, all lives matter. And the tragic thing about this is, in these cities, what's funny is that Obama ran on hope and change, but then short afterwards, he tried to diminish the word hope, to almost take the Christian virtue out of it, which really bothered me. And I'm wondering, in your career and in your vocation, have you seen a drop in attendance in your churches and what that means for hope? Because I think respect for your own life is tied directly to the virtue of hope. And if we don't have hope, there's no respect for the self, never mind the neighbor. And
Right.
that's where lives start to matter, is within the
Mm-hmm.
self, isn't it? So
Yes.
I guess, could you speak to that just a bit? Because I think that's really, no matter how politics is going to play out, Christ's church has seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. And how do we save a people if we can't save the nation?
Wow. Angel, you got a gift. You're doing the right work. You're
Thank you.
so articulate. You're
Yeah.
amazing. And no, I think you've been clear. And back to the point of hope and faith and politicians. It's my job. I think some people in my world felt like I got off track a few years ago when President Obama made his comments about marriage, and we went around to different cities saying, "Hey, we need to protect the institution of marriage for a number of reasons." And what I found was that a lot of people were wedded to the awesome symbolism that having a black president means to people of color in our generation. And I think in that way, I'm very proud of President Obama's achievement. I'm as proud, if not more so, of the nation that is not predominantly black that could vote him into office. I thank God for that. But I do think that, to your point, it is our job as the church. We are the ones who can produce faith, and we need to give a clear call to action. In D.C., the faith community is growing, and a lot of churches are growing with younger parishioners.
Oh, good.
The only problem that we have, though, is that when it comes to applying our faith, that very often many folk are pushing what I'm going to call warmed over liberation theology, or they're pushing socialism instead of the freedom to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
so I think my job now in the next season is going to be to preach the bedrock message of Christ and then challenge, like I mentioned, these 7 bridges to peace that we are giving at the Reconciled Church, that it's really important that we challenge folks to live out, to demonstrate the things that they can do to heal economic problems and to heal social problems in the land.
Love it.
We're gonna have to cut it right there, Bishop. But we promise to have you back on so that we can gather some more information from you, because what you and Bishop Jakes are doing is really important. Really important. So, how can people reach out to you on social media?
Well, they can do it. Let's start off by going to the website, thereconciledchurch.org, and then there's a hashtag, the Reconciled Church, that they can reach us on Twitter. And I think that just come follow us. And we are going to be in the news. Bishop Jakes is doing an amazing book tour and a new book that he's doing called Destiny. And, my brother, my bishop friend is just an awesome voice to the body of Christ. And then there are others who are reaching out soon. We are going to have a whole weekly television program on one of the major Christian networks. I'll just say it, on TBN. I was on Monday night, and we're going to be there. So if you go to our website or hit us on Twitter, all these developments will happen, and we're going to be talking about this every single week on a faith-based television program, and giving testimonials and how people can improve their lives and bringing the gospel back to the house and then to the church, and ultimately to the community.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bishop Harry Jackson here on the Wayne Dupree Show. Bishop, look forward to having you on again. Thank
All
you
right,
so
Wayne,
much.
we'll do it. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angel.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.